Hey, hello, everybody. Welcome back to English Champion. On this episode, I want to talk about young people, young workers especially, and what they're facing in the real world, but also in their own minds and how they're interpreting the world. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is I came across an article over the weekend I thought was interesting because it used a very important word in the article, and that word was hope. That young people today have lost hope, they say, in the possibility of a better future, that what they're doing, if they just keep at it, will pay off someday. And it's leading to burnout and, of course, depression, anxiety, all those types of things. And so I'm not going to read the whole article. I'm just going to highlight a few things, but then I'm going to explain how we need to help young people improve their perspective so that it doesn't get worse, but also so that they can turn things around and just view the world differently. And I have a couple ways we can do that. So let me just share with you really quickly this passage. So it was from a lady named Susie Welch, who I've never heard of her, but she's a professor at NYU, and she was kind of interviewed and was caught off guard by young people and what they were saying to this idea of how they're viewing their future. And so the title of the article says, Susie Welch says Gen Z and millennials are burnt out because older generations worked just as hard, but they had hope. And the caption below the initial photograph of this woman says, baby boomer NYU professor Susie Welch said people should sympathize with the vulnerability and sadness of Gen Z's current situation, crippling debt and uncertainty especially, instead of hating on them. And I'm going to offer a slightly different perspective that yes, we can sympathize, and yeah, we shouldn't hate on young people. I mock young people a lot here, but it's not out of hating them. It's for what we should be doing. We can't just sympathize. That's part of it. Part of being a nice person and trying to be helpful is being sympathetic. What we should be doing is educating young people. And that's really, I think, what has led to some of this hopelessness is we just, as teachers or anyone else who's in any sort of leadership position in the culture, we haven't given young people the right perspective on their own lives and where their lives fit in the big history, the big picture of life. And that's really what proper education is. It's about providing perspective. I'm going to talk about that idea here as we go. And then, as I said, offer some ways of thinking about their futures that maybe could ease some of this hopelessness. So I'm just going to, again, share a little bit of it. Just the premise is that this lady was being interviewed on a podcast, and she was, that she's recognizing that young people they think they're working hard, and yet they don't think that anything's going to happen from it. They're not going to move up. They're not going to be successful. They're not going to achieve these life goals and dreams that many people of other generations supposedly were able to do. And so that's what's creating the hopelessness. And she said this insight emerged from a conversation she had with a 25-year-old freelance worker who asked Welch, this professor, to create more content about worker fatigue among young people because her friends were just so burnt out. When Welch told this worker she used to work 7 days a week at that age and loved the work and would have done more of it if she could, the young woman offered a striking rebuttal. But you had hope. And she said, I did have hope. We all had hope. And we believe that if you worked hard, you were rewarded for it. And so this is the disconnect. So this idea of hopelessness is kind of what jarred her and caught her attention. And so she started rethinking how she talks to young people. And some of it is empirically backed up. There is a lot of data, and that's what the rest of the article offers. That these aren't necessarily just opinions. There's some truth to these claims that young people do have it more difficult than previous generations. Again, though, is that a perspective problem, or is it factually accurate? So there's a collection of data. Again, I'm not going to give all of it, just highlight a few things. One thing I thought was interesting was according to a 2024 Gallup poll, just 31% of workers under age 35 said they're thriving. And I thought about that, and I thought, yeah, who under age 35 feels like they're thriving? I know I didn't. I was coming out of grad school, which cost me a ton of money, and I didn't have a job, and my wife and I weren't making a lot of money, and we were sort of just still figuring out what we were doing with our careers. That's not abnormal. Okay. If you're under 35 and you feel like you're kind of just treading water and you're, you're, you're working all these hours just to stay afloat, like that's kind of normal actually. Especially if you have kids and families that rely on you and you got to provide for. I mean, yeah, that is how it feels. So for anyone under 35, it's not weird. If you feel like you're not thriving yet, yeah, join the club. That was all of us. So this is not necessarily something to panic about. This person said to Fortune magazine, I think the distance between people is greater than it has ever been before. Millennials are in a particularly bad spot, broadly speaking. About 66% of millennials report moderate or high levels of burnout. Again, like that's pretty normal. I mean, most of us in the last 30 years, especially when you're young, yeah, you feel burnt out. When I left school, I graduated at 22 and went and was a public school teacher, and I would go into my classroom at 6 in the morning, and then I would leave at 3 because I had to go in early and I couldn't stay late because I then immediately had to drive to the high school and coach basketball for the next 3 hours. So it was 6 or 7 o'clock at night before I got home, and then I basically haven't eaten all day yet because I worked through lunch to help my students, and then you got to grade papers or plan for the next day and all that, and then I did it all over again. So I was working 12-hour days. If we had a game that night, I wouldn't get home till 10 o'clock or midnight. Like 12 to 18-hour days almost every day. Like you don't think that leads to burnout? Of course it does. So, and this is normal. This is what all people go through, especially when you're young and you're trying to understand the working world and trying to move up and trying to improve and all that stuff. Like this isn't weird. This is normal for many, many young people. Now, the next paragraph says, one possible explanation for the higher levels of burnout among millennials could be their unique career pressures and expectations. Okay, what's so unique about being a young person today? The report includes more demanding work environments than other generations. It's like, okay, here's where that perspective comes in. More demanding work environments. Really? The fact that many people can work from home in the comfort of their living room now, or that things are hybridized where you can do stuff online and sometimes you can go into the office. Like, do we have an entire generation of young people who are working in coal mines right now? How many of them are farmers or working in factories? Or you want to talk about demanding work environments? Yeah, go live like people lived throughout most of human history until the last few decades. Those were pretty demanding work environments where you're working for low wages, brutally physical conditions, conditions that led to being unhealthy and getting injuries and, not being able to live past 60. Like, this was the normal working world for most of history, modern history. And yet you're saying that young people today have more demanding work environments. I don't know about that. Their constant connectivity, high performance expectations in a competitive job market. High performance expectations. You mean like every person who goes to any job that is of any high value anyway? Yeah, even your boss at McDonald's is going to have expectations that you know how to run the fry machine and the cash register. Like, every place has high expectations. Now take that to being a teacher or a lawyer or working in an accounting firm or whatever job you have. You're going to have a boss who's going to have expectations so that the company succeeds, so that you look good in the corporate culture, like so that you have a good influence on the people around you and the people in your community. Every place has high performance standards. So again, this is not new. We have to have some perspective here and stop assuming that everything that's going on with millennials and Gen Z are unique to them, because it's just not the case. Yes, how it presents itself in our highly technical world and all that is a bit unique, but the problems of feeling burnout, of having bosses with high expectations, of having demanding work environments, of feeling like you're behind your peers and you're slow to get on these rungs of the career success ladder or these life goals. Yeah, man, we all felt that. That's normal. If don't be surprised if you don't feel those things and you don't accomplish some of your life goals, and you don't feel somewhat stable until you're 40. That's That's normal. We've become so wealthy and successful in our culture over the last, again, 30 years that everyone just assumes, oh, at age 22, I should have a great job and I should make a lot of money and I should be able to buy a house and I should have a family and all these things, where it's like, yeah, it's way harder than that for all of us. So we do sympathize because we know what it's like. It's not that we're putting you down because, oh, you're just a bunch of wimps. It's because, no, we've been there and we're here to say, yeah, you can get through it. Trust us. It's a process. You have to just have a longer time horizon and you just have to stick to some things for a while and things will start working out. We'll get to the idea of hope here in a moment. Millennial workers are also part of the sandwich generation, taking care of both children and their aging parents. Yeah, that's all of us. Every generation is a sandwich generation. Every generation who ends up between the ages of 30 and 50 or whenever is in this exact same boat. So the people in that generation now are going through nothing different than people did 40 years ago or 100 years ago. You're always taking care of children and you're always taking care of your older parents or older relatives. That's normal. And yes, it's stressful. We all get it, but it's not unique. We have to understand it's not just you. You're not special in that way. Everyone has gone through this to some extent. More than 60% of workers who juggle both responsibilities worry about burnout. Well, yeah, because that's called responsibility. Responsibility is taxing, and it does lead to burnout. When you're constantly worried about your kids, you're constantly worried about your parents, and you're constantly worried about, do I have enough money? What's the best way of caring for our children? What's the best way of educating them? Should I transfer jobs? Should I go back to school? Like, yeah, man, this has been going on forever. So it's not new. Next paragraph is where we are really pushing the line here of how hopeless young people are. The context for this burnout crisis that young people are being forced. Notice the passive voice there, being forced to navigate multiple world-altering crises all at once. Climate change. Okay, I'm not going to get into debate about whether that's real or whether it's a pressing issue or not, but like, how many people are thinking about that every single day? Even if you care about it, like, is that how you're spending your time? Is that what you're worried about at work? Like when you're working at your job as an accountant, is climate change really a pressing issue for you every single day? When you're thinking about, what kind of dinner you're going to make for your kids that night, are you thinking about climate change? I don't know. Why are you assuming that's such a pressing issue? I'm not saying we should ignore it. If it's a real thing, we can have that discussion. But like, is that affecting your day-to-day life like your job does, like your family does, all that kind of stuff? It seems like if that's what you're thinking, you're kind of putting the extra burden on yourself and maybe you're burning yourself out. Political instability. Yeah, sure, there's a lot of that going on. Again, do I think about that every single day? No, I couldn't care less what goes on out there. I've stopped paying attention to that stuff a while ago because, yeah, it's overly stressful. I don't need it. I don't care. It doesn't affect my relationship with my family. It doesn't affect my relationship with my work, how I view my purpose and my job, my function as a intelligent, hardworking person. Like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I don't worry about it. And again, that's nothing new. There's been political instability forever. So is it weirder now because of some of the things going on? Technology exacerbates a lot of it, but there's always been political instability. Ongoing effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. There's no ongoing effects. Yeah, people get sick still, but like, that's not a thing to worry about. I didn't worry about it when we were going through it. I could not have cared less. I didn't even think about it. I lived my life completely normally. My wife and I didn't do anything different. It was as if it wasn't happening for us. We didn't care. And guess what? We were fine from it. So if you're constantly thinking every day about that, like, that's on you, man. I don't know. I saw someone online the other day who said that they had recently tested positive for COVID. Like, who's testing for that? If you get sick, just stay home and be sick. That's fine. Why are you even testing for it? That's just so weird. I don't know why people are even thinking about it. Economic uncertainty. Yeah, again, that's always going on. And international conflicts like the Russia-Ukraine war. Yeah, I get it. If you have family members who live there, that's a problem. That would be stressful. But like, for everyone else, like, who? Not that we should ignore that that's going on. That's a horrible situation over there. But again, that's not affecting how I'm going to feed my kids or deal with my parents or what I'm going to do at my job. Or I'm not really worried about that because that's out of my purview of what I have to deal with on a daily basis. Do I care about that in the macro? Yes, of course, I care about a lot of things. But on a day-to-day level, which is what this is about, this burnout idea, yeah, the thought, it doesn't cross my mind. And I have other more pressing issues to worry about. The psychological impact is profound and measurable. Research shows pandemic related and climate related distress are linked to more depression and anxiety. Well, yeah. So stop thinking about it. Problem solved. You're cured. You're welcome. Stop thinking about it. You'll be fine. Many people think that everything is falling apart. The sense of powerlessness, especially making enough money to support lifestyles, family, housing, and a future, has led to an erosion of institutional trust. Unlike baby boomers who embraced existing institutions to get rich and live a comfortable life, the younger generations do not feel that institutions can improve their situation. Really? You think everyone just went along with institutions? Huh. Do you know anything about the baby boomers? Do you know anything about what went on during the 1960s? The 1960s were about breaking down the institutions. Have some historical knowledge here. I'm from Gen X, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Do you know what Gen X was all about? Not paying attention to institutions, complete distrust of big corporations and big government. Yeah, that every generation is against institutions in some way. That's part of being a young person. It's part of being a little bit rebellious. It's part of starting to become awakened in your late teens and 20s to how like the world doesn't work the way you thought it did. You're moving out of childhood and you're starting to go, oh, things are way more complicated. I don't trust any of these people. Yeah, that's what baby boomers, that's what Gen X did. Like, this is normal. So is this still going on? Of course it is. I understand why young people today are having problems with the institutions of our culture. But again, that's not a new thing. Many generations have felt that distrust. Then it gets into a bunch of economic stats. And this is where I definitely do sympathize, okay? There's the stats that have been coming public lately about the proportion of income to housing costs that have just skyrocketed in the last several decades, where, people used to only spend 20% on their housing. Now it's up to like 40% or whatever the numbers are. It's way higher. Of course, same thing with education. And as a teacher, trust me, I definitely sympathize with that. I hate the fact that college has gotten so much more expensive. Both housing and college, if you would get the government out of those industries, things would probably tend to come down because government makes everything more expensive. And if you're a young person concerned about expenses at university, well, start marching for lowering administrative pay. One of the reasons it's so expensive is because you guys are paying administrators and college presidents millions of dollars. Well, they don't need to be making that. If you want your tuition cheaper, that's an angle you should be arguing for. We're not going to go to your school unless you reduce the salary of your administrators, because they aren't involved in teaching. So they're not part of the education process. So why are they getting paid so much money? Well, that's an argument you could make. So if you want things to come down, there are ways that prices could start to level out a bit, but you need to make that argument for yourselves. So again, that is something I sympathize with. I don't like that you're in such debt when you come out of college. I don't like that houses are so extremely expensive in many parts of the country. I totally do sympathize. But again, what we have to do is, especially from an education standpoint, we have to educate young people on perspective. I wrote a whole article about it. It's part of my book for students. I wrote about it. I'll provide the link below. But basically, it just says that, being an educated person means you can place things in context. And you can recognize when things are truly anomalies, where you can go, wow, I've studied history and this thing has never happened before. Or I've studied science and this is a completely new scientific discovery. But a lot of things in life reflect back to things that have actually occurred before. Like, we've seen some of this before. Scripture says there's nothing new under the sun. The fact that young people think everything is brand new and is a specific problem just for them right now is a failure of education. We as parents and teachers, or anyone else who guides young people, we haven't taught people enough perspective that many things we face that scare us, that are obstacles for us, have been encountered by other people too, and we can learn from them. We can adjust accordingly, and we can recognize that, oh, once I know that other people have gone through this, I can sense that, well, they survived and they made it, through to the other side. Well, maybe I can too, and I don't have to be as scared of this thing. Or I saw what these people did, and now I learned from it, and so now when that arises, I can tackle it the way they did and solve that problem. Perspective changes a lot of this. And so if you have a little historical understanding about what other generations have gone through regarding work, regarding raising families, regarding the political environment, whatever it is, you start to go, oh, okay, well, this thing that I thought was so unique and I thought was such a danger or an obstacle to me, it's actually kind of normal, and so maybe I don't have to freak out as much about it. That's what education is. It's a proper perspective on reality so that everything that pops up doesn't freak you out all the time. And that's where we have young people. They enter the working world and they're stunned that, maybe it's hard to find jobs, or that the pay is lower than they thought, or the working conditions are different than they thought. It's like, yeah, because you didn't have any experience, and you weren't taught about the realities of the working world. Whereas if you'd have studied how other people have had careers in the past, you would notice that this isn't such an anomaly, and you would get past it. Again, there are certain things that are becoming a bit worse, and I completely understand those things, and I sympathize. But, there have always been forms of these problems. Back when I was a small kid, I was born in the late 70s and grew up in the early 80s, interest rates for buying a house were like 18%. You know how insane the world would get, how freaked out people would get online if they're like, interest rates are 18%. How does anyone afford a house? Well, interest rates were high, but housing prices were way cheaper. So there was a balance to it. But because everyone freaked out about that, then the government gets involved and says, well, we don't like that interest rates are so high, so let's bring down interest rates. Well, what happens when that happens? Prices go up. So these things reflect upon each other. And again, if you don't have any historical perspective and you're a young person, you're like, I can't understand why I can't buy a house. Well, when you go and get your 3% mortgage rate, well, that's why it's so darn expensive. And so, among other factors, there's also, again, government intervention into regulations about where and how to build. So developers are having a hard time building more housing for people. Well, why? Because the government's too involved. So I'm not saying the government's the problem of everything, but these have causes. The feelings you're feeling and the situation you're in have causes. It's not just, that you're so unique historically. It's that, well, these things have happened before, and there tend to be patterns for why they happen. And so we need to learn from those and address them if we want, or just, have some patience and wait it out, because things will tend to get better. So, when there's all these economic problems, political problems, climate problems, war problems, all these things that young people are scared about, we do sympathize. We don't hate you for feeling that way. But what we need to do is we need to educate you on the historical perspective and give you a better path for dealing with it. Right now, it seems like young people want older folks to just sympathize and feel bad for you. But then on top of that, well, make things easier for me. Give me some advantages. Help me out. It's like, well, those come with costs too. Those aren't as easy to implement as you think. So, maybe there's other ways of approaching this. So that's what we have to do, is we have to use perspective to try to solve these problems. And that usually will help us avoid this path of hopelessness that this author is talking about. So, from a religious standpoint, when you look in scripture, there's lots of passages about hope, and I'll put some of those up here. And so you can look for yourself what those mean and what they say in various passages of scripture. And in those places in biblical text, the reason why hope is so important is because what it does is it takes the focus off of yourself, and it puts reality into a bigger perspective and on a longer time horizon. So when you're young and you're poor and you're not connecting to people and you hate your boss and you're eating ramen noodles every day, all that stuff, it feels kind of hopeless and you don't like it. But hope is the sense that well, there are other things going on. You know, I'm still here. I still have a roof over my head. I still am eating today. You know, maybe things are better than I thought. And then you say, well, what else is going on in the world that is actually way worse than what I'm dealing with? And now you start to think, well, maybe I'm a little bit fortunate. And if I just keep plugging away, maybe something better will appear. And again, for Christians anyway, even time itself doesn't have to be a limitation, where we go, yeah, I know things are rough right now, but whether it's in my lifetime or not, I know there's something better, that there is a future that is going to be great. And that's what I'm looking forward to. Yeah, it might suck for now, and I don't like that I'm broke and I have bad relationships around me and I don't like my job and all that stuff. But at some point in the future, it will get better. And, you know, that's from a Christian standpoint, that's what it's talking about is, you know, the reason we have hope is because it takes the focus off yourself and puts the hope in something else. It's not just about you. Focus on something else. In Christianity's perspective, focus on God, focus on Christ's sacrifice for you, focus on loved ones, focus on helping other people. And that, yeah, maybe even in this life, even if you do everything right, you won't see the positives. But in the long run, even after you're long gone, the benefit you will have brought to the world will be something worthwhile. That is the hope that the biblical wisdom offers us. That because of Christ's salvation, you don't have to worry about yourself. You'll be taken care of eventually. That you don't have to just have the focus on you. Maybe you could focus on other people and bring hope to them. And by bringing hope to other people, you would feel more of a sense of hope for yourself. Like there's all sorts of things that you can do that are not bringing the entire world inward on you. And yeah, because that does lead to hopelessness. So there's some Christian passages if you're interested. But even for my secular friends out there, which may be most of you, I don't know. You know, I'm a literature person. That's my background. And so stories, either in text form or in film form, are what I immerse myself in. And so even if you don't want a religious perspective on hope, you can have a secular perspective too. And some of my favorite films are about just that very thing. I'll give you just 3 examples here really quickly. First, I have the poster right here on my wall. Story of Rocky. All right. If you know that film, spoiler, I'm going to ruin it for you. He, right before the big fight, he is lying in bed and he tells Adrian, I can't win. I'm not going to win this fight. In fact, not only am I going to lose this fight, I might be seriously injured because I'm fighting the champion of the world. He's the best fighter and I'm a nobody. I'm going to get destroyed here. And he says, but you know what? Even though I know I'm going to lose, talk about hopelessness. Like you're going to lose. It's autumn. There's no way you're going to win this fight. That's hopelessness. He says, it doesn't really matter because all my job is every time I get knocked down is to just keep standing up. And I'm just going to last the whole fight. I'm not going to get knocked out. I'm going to be standing at the end. And if I just do that, I will have proven to myself that no matter what the world throws at me or whatever this fighter is going to throw at me, I can take it. And so, you know, my reward is not winning the fight. That's not the goal. It's just to get through it. And when you get through it, I will feel for myself that I've been successful. And what he also hopes other people see is that they, by watching him stay standing and take the punishment and face the hopelessness head on, that he brings inspiration to other people and that they respect him for being so tough and brave. So even in a silly boxing movie, you might think, where, oh, it's just about 2 dudes beating up each other and, you know, who cares? Like the message of that film is one of hope amid hopelessness. When someone says, this is a hopeless situation, I can't win the fight. In fact, I'm going to tell the audience who's watching this movie right now, here's going to be the ending. And yet throughout the whole ending, we keep thinking Rocky's actually going to win the fight. That's how powerful that message is that even though he just told us he's going to lose, we're cheering for him as the fight goes on, as the end of the film goes on. And yes, at the end, when he does lose, we don't even care because he fulfilled the promise of hope that he just talked about right before the fight. That yes, you weren't going to win. You're not as good as that guy. But I respect what you went through, and that gives hope to me and to any other viewer who is watching the fight or in the movie, or for those of us watching the movie, that no matter how tough it gets, my job is to just keep going. It's to keep working hard, and whenever I get knocked down, just get back up and keep at it. Because maybe it'll work out for me, and of course, the next several movies, he does win the fights, and so it does work out in the long run. And it inspires a bunch of other people to not give up either. So when we talk about hope and lengthening the time horizon, well, that's what he does. He goes, I'm not going to win this fight, but maybe I'll win another fight some other time in the future. I don't know, but I'll worry about that later. Right now, this is all I can do, and I'm just going to commit to doing it to the best of my ability. And that's what he does. So even when he tells us how hopeless it's going to be, the message of hope comes shining through the movie screen. Another one, The Shawshank Redemption. The message of that story, Stephen King's original story, and then the film in 1994, comes through when here's a guy, the main character, is sent to prison for a crime he didn't commit. And he's stuck there with a warden who's terrible and corrupt, and the guards who are terrible and corrupt, and his buddies in there, though he becomes friends with them, they are like, yeah, man, just, you're not going anywhere. Like, you're in here for life. Might as well just get used to it. And he continues to believe, even through some dark periods, that no, I will get out of here somehow, some way. And that is what is going to keep me going every day. And so Red, who's his friend, who's very cynical and, he's lost hope. He doesn't even care if he gets out at his parole hearings. He's like, whatever. He has to convince Red that you have to have hope. The famous line from the film is, hope is a great thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. And so if you have that hope that conditions will get better someday, then you constantly have something to look forward to. Because if you don't have anything to look forward to, well, yeah, that's how you become depressed and you become nihilistic and you just give up. Well, then you're not good for anybody. You're not good for yourself, and you're not good for the people around you. So you have to have something in you. And as he explains in the film, Andy Dufresne, he kind of talks about this idea that even if I'm in prison and I can't do anything about it, I still need to have this tiny corner of my brain that believes in something beautiful and beyond and hopeful. Because that's something no one else can ever take away from you. They can take your body, they can trap you in a cell. But if I have this tiny piece of my mind, well, then I'll always be free. And I'll always be able to choose how I want to respond to the injustices of the world. And that's pretty powerful. And finally, by the end, of course, we know that Red starts to believe in hope. Once Andy escapes from prison, he starts making that, when Red gets out and he starts making that journey to go find him, he starts to believe that hope is real. And we have that beautiful final image of the two friends hugging on the beach. And so all the terrible things they went through by being in prison, and for Andy, for being there wrongfully, he's not even guilty, it ends up okay in the end. It wasn't the way he would have liked it in the beginning, and it took a very long time. It took 20 years for Andy to dig out of there, but it works out in the end, as long as you keep the perspective that I'm free to determine how I want to face this difficult situation. And when you do it through a sense of hopefulness rather than hopelessness, you have something to aim at, and a better life is possible. The last one is the movie Castaway. Castaway is kind of a slow movie because Tom Hanks is by himself through a big chunk of the middle of the movie. But he gives that amazing speech when he finally gets off the island after 4 years of being by himself. And, he thought he was going to die. And he gets so depressed out there that he actually considers suicide. And he had to have hope that, well, I'm going to figure this out. Somehow I'm going to figure out a way to get off this stupid island. And then so he was at the depths of hopelessness. He's stranded by himself in the middle of nowhere for years with no connection to anybody. He's struggling to eat and stay alive and all that stuff. The epitome of hopelessness. And yet he still stays optimistic enough to get himself to build a little raft and get himself off the island. But then it gets even worse, because when he gets out and he gets back to land and he is back to civilization and meeting all the people he used to know, he discovers that the woman he loved, because it had been years, had to move on, and she ended up marrying someone else. So now he feels hopeless again. After all those years of being hopeless, he's not in a worse place, but he's in a emotionally worse place. Because even back on the island, at least emotionally, he was still thinking of her. Well, now he can't. The person he loved is now with someone else. So he has to move on from that now. And in that amazing speech he gives, where it's one take, the camera moves in, and he just says, well, what do you do when you're in those situations? And he says, well, you get up every day and you breathe in and out, and you just focus on the possibility that something could change. You never know what the tide's going to bring in. And so sure enough, by the end of the film, we see that through some magical coincidence, he's given this new opportunity that potentially could improve his life, and he could meet someone else and start his life over. So this idea of hope with young people, it's, again, a matter of perspective, that you're not thinking in a long enough timeline. You're not looking at history, and you're not looking ahead to the future enough. That things take time, and it's not going to be perfect for a while. And, the question is, well, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to mope? Are you going to crawl into a hole? Because if you do that, like Tom Hanks says in the film, well, you never know what the tide's going to bring in. So maybe at some point things do start to change. But if you're stuck in depression mode, in the hole, you're not going to even notice when that opportunity maybe passes by. Whereas if you're constantly on the lookout for that new opportunity, that new person to talk to, that new skill to learn, that new piece of knowledge to learn about and read about, whatever it is, if you close in on yourself and only think of the hopelessness of it, well, when something does present itself, you're going to miss it. And then you're going to double down on your hopelessness and go, well, see, there's no opportunities for me to get any better, so I'll just stay here. Meanwhile, once a year, once every 6 months, a new opportunity starts popping by, and you didn't even notice it because you're so absorbed in yourself. So yes, we do sympathize. We understand young people have a tough time. The economy is a little bit different than it was in previous generations, but those people had it difficult too. It was just a different kind of difficulty. So a little historical perspective would help, and a little bit of reading or movie watching of some great films that have excellent moral lessons to them that teach us the truth about human nature, and that we have to have hope that things are going to get better. Because, like I said, if you don't, and you just crawl in a hole and give up, well, then you've sealed your fate. Definitely nothing's ever going to get better. But you get up every day, you do whatever work you have to do, create things, make things, serve people, look for opportunities, talk to others, learn new skills. Whatever you got to do every single day, that's what you do. And I promise eventually things will turn around. There's no need to be that hopeless. There's no need to have the depression and anxiety if you have the proper perspective. And you can get that through a religious perspective, or even if that's not your thing, some great artworks of history and culture have given us great examples to follow. And things aren't so dark, because you never know what the tide will bring in. And for Rocky, it's, you get up off the mat. Don't stay down. Don't quit. Just keep standing up. And for Andy Dufresne, there has to be something better, because if you give up that part of yourself, then you're no longer free. You're a slave to your own emotions and a slave to circumstance. And you should never be that. You're the master of your destiny. You get to choose what path you want to take, and the way to choose that path is to start with hope. Thanks for watching. See you next time.